Good afternoon. This is Gina Campanella with Campanella Law Office. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for our presentation, Haunted by Hipaa, Exorcise the Hipaa Ghost. And our special guest today is Andy Garlick from the Garlick Group, and the Garlick Group is a strategic partner of Campanella Law Office. And a little bit more about Andy. Andy is CEO and principal of the Garlick Group, which is a consultancy serving small and medium-sized businesses and nonprofits, and they specialize in cyber compliance, digital transformation, technology, business operations, governance, and fundraising. Prior to forming his company, Andy was the SVP Business Systems for WPP Group USA, and he was responsible for policy development and overseeing of financial HCM and other business systems in North America and for all of the WPP companies. He also served as the group CIO for WPP's SpecCom group and WPP's digital group. Andy's been involved in leading the transformation on several global initiatives, including the consolidation and outsourcing of WPP's HR, payroll, and benefits systems. And before that, Andy was global CIO of Young and Rubicam Inc. So you can see our small and medium business clients are very lucky to have someone with Andy's experience on board for their businesses and practices. Andy was in the advertising and media industry for 25 years, working for Campbell Ewald in Detroit in the 80s, and joined Young and Rubicam in 1993 as its IT director in North America. He spent the first half of his career in finance, including as treasurer for the University of Detroit, and controller of Campbell Ewald Co., where he built and installed several financial systems. Andy is also an expert in the nonprofit sector. In addition to the 10 years he spent as the treasurer of the University of Detroit, Andy has served on numerous boards and was instrumental in helping the United Way develop a strategic plan for the growth of technology in the nonprofit sector in 1996. For his work in the Detroit metropolitan area, he was recognized as an executive hero by Crane's Detroit Business. Andy has taught nonprofit accounting at the graduate level at the University of Michigan Dearborn, served as an adjunct at Columbia University, and he's currently an assistant professor of religious studies at Felician University and a professor of Latin at the Angelicum Academy. In New Jersey, Andy founded the Family Support Organization of Bergen County, which provides education support and advocacy to parents and caregivers of children with mental, emotional, and behavioral problems. And Andy is recognized as a powerful advocate for the family voice in children's mental health and received several awards for his work. Andy has been a Rotarian for over 20 years and has served as president of his club 3 times and has served as assistant governor and chair of youth services for District 7490 for several years. In addition to an MBA, Andy has a BA in philosophy and an MA in classical literature, is both a certified PMP and HRIP, and holds a certificate in college business management, a certificate in fundraising, and a certificate in forgiveness therapy training. So I will let Andy take it over from here and talk to you all about how all of those amazing credentials and all of that wonderful experience make him an excellent partner to help you exorcise the Hipaa ghost. Before you begin, Andy, I just want to let our attendees know that if they have any questions throughout the presentation, they can type them in the question box or the chat box, and there will be time for question and answer at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Gina, and welcome everyone who's on today. You know, I always get nervous when people read my obituary before these things. I remember someone asking a question once going, "What's the matter? Do you have an unhappy home life?" But I am just a person who wants to get involved and solve problems. And so today we want to talk about how we might solve the Hipaa problem for you. So welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to cover as quickly as we can what Hipaa is, to whom it applies, the 5 key areas of responsibility within the Hipaa law, and what does a practice need to do. So if you're a healthcare practitioner, and I don't care if you're medical, dental, behavioral health, insurance, whatever, you are going to be covered under HIPAA. And there are some serious fines for non-compliance. We'll talk a little about how we can help and then offer you some next steps if you are interested. So what is HIPAA? HIPAA is an acronym for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was created way back in the 90s. So it's been around, it's on the books for a number of years, and it's been amended many times. It was created primarily to modernize the flow of healthcare information and to protect personally identifiable information. You're going to hear that PII acronym talked about a lot when we talk about HIPAA. And it also was enacted to address the limitations on healthcare insurance coverage, particularly portability from one plan to another or one state to another. And as I said, the legislation has evolved significantly since the 90s. It's covered more and more people, and it's covered more and more areas. So there are several rules since the original privacy rule was enacted in 1996. Now, these rules include both laws and regulations. What are regulations? Well, Congress can pass a law, and in the law, they will say that the Department of Health and Human Services is empowered to write regulations to enforce this law. So regulations have the same impact as law. And right now, as of today, there are 5 key areas that are covered by these laws and regulations, and we will go over them all in a minute. But understand that despite its being enacted since 1996 and amended and expanded over the years, about half of every healthcare practice in this country firmly believe that they would fail a HIPAA audit. 80% of practices who are audited fail the meaningful use audit. Unauthorized access to patients' records, private identifiable information, accounts for about 20% of the HIPAA breaches. That includes such things as being hacked, emails being stolen, emails being intercepted, as well as people just coming into your office and rifling through your files. Everyone thinks that HIPAA has primarily to do with electronics and with computers and with insurance companies and things, and that is wrong. If you have patients and if you record anywhere information on those patients, even if it's a scratched notepad on a yellow pad and stuck in a dress drawer, the fact that this information is written down, you are covered by HIPAA. It gets even more and more complicated when you put this information on a computer. But understand, this is not only about computers. What's happening today is that ransomware is really growing as an industry. We read the big ones in the paper, like the pipeline a few months ago that was hacked on the East Coast and shut everything down. That was a ransomware attack from the Soviet Union. Criminals in the Soviet Union, not necessarily the government. But what's happening is that the bad actors, the criminals, are finding that they can make a lot of money by going lower and lower on the tree and grabbing the independent practitioner because they don't have all the controls in place that the big guys do. And if they do enough of them, they can make a significant amount of money. And then on top of that, if you're not HIPAA compliant, not only do you have to pay the ransomware guys to get your data back, you're going to have to pay the government significant fines for being hacked. So keep that in mind. And over the past few years, over 200 million patient records have been compromised. That is a lot of information that's floating out there on the dark web. So who enforces HIPAA? So we have these laws, we have these regulations, but you'll say, no one's ever come up to my office and said, show me your HIPAA badge. They are policed by the Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights, primarily. They enforce the federal laws and regulations. In addition, the state attorneys general in each state can take action against any entity who's found not to be in compliance. So if a federal auditor shows up and knocks on your door and shows you their gold badge, and it finds out that you're in trouble with the feds, trust me, you're going to be visited by the state very, very soon. And both the Office of Civil Rights and the state's attorney general have the authority to impose significant financial penalties on anyone who should be compliant with HIPAA and is not. So keep that in mind. We'll talk about what the penalties are in a few minutes. So the question that Gina and I normally get is, well, does HIPAA apply to me? I mean, I'm not a big hospital. I don't deal with insurance companies. People pay me in checks and cash. And well, the simple answer, if you are a healthcare provider, behavioral health, dental health, psychological health, medical health, specialist, whatever, the simple answer is yes, HIPAA applies to you. If you collect and store personal identifiable information, that's that infamous PII, you are subject to the law. You could collect it on paper or electronically. It does not matter if you take insurance, and it doesn't matter if you share it with anybody. The very fact that you collect it makes you subject to HIPAA. If you have patients and you have patient records, you are subject to HIPAA. So keep that in mind. Now, in addition, the law around 2012, 2014, somewhere around there, expanded the people that are covered under HIPAA to what the law calls business associates. Business associates are people that aren't necessarily in the healthcare industry, but who work with you or you contract for. So for example, a business associate could be your IT guy. A business associate could be your attorney. A business associate could be a lab that you work with. A business associate could be the custodial crew that cleans your office. If you have any of those relationships, and that's clearly not a complete list, you are required to guarantee that the integrity of any personal information is secure from them, or if they have business access to it for good business reasons, that they protect the information as well. So what does that have to do with my cleaning lady? Well, she comes in your office at night and she could open up file cabinets. If your computer is on, she could look on your computer. She could steal information. It may take months before you realize that one of your patient's records have been compromised. So again, the cleaning crew, for example, is a business associate under the law, and you have a responsibility to make sure that they are doing the right thing and that your information is protected when they're around. So what is this PII, this scary personal identifiable information? Well, this is a short list of what's listed in the regulations. It could be the names. It could be a geographical identifier. That could be an address, phone numbers, email addresses, medical record numbers, details about their account, their license plate, their fingerprints, any unique identifying characteristic. When I visit a doctor, they say, do I have any scars or anything? Those are unique identifying characteristics. Dates related to the person, social security numbers and details, health insurance numbers and details, anything that could possibly identify the individual in this day of cybercrime is considered personal identifiable information. And you have a legal responsibility under the law to protect this information. Now, Note well, the main takeaway for HIPAA compliance is that any company or individual, so this could be your practice, this could be people who work for you, this could be the cleaning lady that comes in at night. Any company or individual that comes into contact with personal health information, personal identifiable information, must enact and enforce appropriate policies, procedures, and safeguards to protect the data. And if you are audited, if someone files a complaint against you with the Office of Civil Rights and you are audited, you must demonstrate that you've had the appropriate policies, procedures, safeguards, and audits in place for the last 6 years to avoid being fined. And you will be fined when there has been a failure to enact or enforce these policies, procedures, or safeguards, even if personal information has not been exposed. So let's say that one of your patients complains, and the Office of Civil Rights comes and knocks on your door. And they say, show me the audits, and we'll talk about the audits in a minute, for the past 6 years. Show me all of your policies, your procedures, your safeguards, your internal controls, your computer controls, everything that's covered by the law. And even if no information has been stolen, there's been no attack, there's just been a complaint. And they come in and you don't have everything required by the law, you will be fined. So make sure that you are buttoned down. Now, what are the 5 rules, the 5 areas that the current law covers? Well, the privacy rule, the security rule, the breach notification rule, the enforcement rule, and the Omnibus Rule. That's if it doesn't fit anything else, we're going to get you on the Omnibus Rule. So what's the privacy rule? The privacy rule dictates how and when personal identifiable information can be used and disclosed. And it applies to all healthcare organizations. And since 2013, it's also extended to this class called business associates. The law defines limits regarding the use of patient information when no prior authorization has been given by the patient. So that's another important thing that we need to talk about. Besides having the policies in place, you need procedures in place where you can get written permission from your patients to do things with their information. So for example, if you're going to share their information with an insurance company, you need to get their affirmative permission in writing to do that. If you do it without that permission, you're in violation of the law. If you share it with another specialist, say for example, if you do not have specific permission from the patient to share their information with the specialist you're consulting with, you're in violation of the law. And so you want to make sure that these documents that you're going to give your patients to sign are properly constructed so that they meet all the terms of the law. The privacy rule also says that patients and their legal representatives have a right to a copy of their health records, and they can request any corrections. If you do get a request for a copy of a patient's records from a patient, you have 30 days to respond to the request. If you don't do it within 30 days, they can file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, and you will be fined. Now, the security rule. This covers electronic information, and it encumbers anybody who can access, create, alter, or transfer patient information. So you need in your office, in your practice, in your computer network, technical safeguards in place. And that includes encrypting all data. And everything must conform to NIST standards. If anything goes outside the company's firewall, and that's assuming you have a firewall. Let's say that you have a router, let's say that you signed up with Verizon for internet, and they sent this little plastic thing with a couple of antennas on it and said, plug this in, and then now you've got a network. Those are toys. As far as I'm concerned, as an IT professional, those are toys. They do not have a firewall in them. If you really need a better router that has a managed firewall. If you don't, you're opening yourself up for trouble. You also have to have physical safeguards. You know, if I came to your office, am I able to see what the clerk is typing on the screen? If I can, you're in violation. And you have to have administrative safeguards that unite the privacy rule and the security rule. This is a lot of documentation, and this is what really compliance is. It's about documenting what you've done to prove that you're in compliance with the law. Now, as far as administrative safeguards are concerned, every practice has to have a security officer and a privacy officer. Now, let's say that you're just a small independent dentist. You know, it's just you and your office clerk and your dental assistant, just three of you. You can appoint yourself as the security officer and the privacy officer, but understand that you are then going to be held accountable personally for everything. You can outsource some of this, and that's part of the services that the Garlick Group offers. We can be your security officer, and Gina, could be your privacy officer. But that's something we will have a conversation about if you're interested. Now, what must you do as the security officer and privacy officer? You must annually undertake 6 audits, 6 separate audits that cover all the areas of HIPAA. And then if the audits come up with any deficiencies, you must have a written plan on how you're going to correct these deficiencies so that next year when you do these audits, you can show that you've been corrected. When the gent with the gold badge from the Office of Civil Rights knocks on your door, one of the first things he's going to ask is, show me the audit results of the 6 audits for the past 6 years. And if you don't have them, you are going to be in serious trouble. I'll talk about the audits in a few minutes. The next rule is the breach notification rule. So if data is stolen, if you become aware that data has been stolen from your practice, it could be hacked through a computer, the cleaning lady might have taken a file home with them, anything like that. If you become aware of a breach, you have 60 days to notify everybody that the breach has happened. And most of the time, you're going to have both a moral and legal responsibility to protect your patients from any ramifications of that breach. That's why oftentimes I know you get in the mail that your records have been breached and we're offering you 3 free years of security monitoring. That's cost. That's a cost, and you will have to do that. If individuals whose personal information has been compromised must also be notified within 60 days. So part of the process of having a good HIPAA plan in place is an incident response plan. What are you going to do? What are the steps you're going to take if there's a breach? And these are the formal steps. This is how we're going to document it. This is how we're going to get the information. This is who at the state and at the federal government we're going to notify. These are the types of files we're going to send them. This is how we're going to get a list of all of our patients. This is how we're going to inform all of our patients, and these are the steps we're going to take to indemnify our patients. And the auditor comes in, they're going to want to see your incident response plan. If you don't have one, they're going to look at you with a eyebrow raised and mark that down in their little yellow book. So keep that in mind as well. Now, the Omnibus Rule. This extends HIPAA coverage to business associates, and it prohibits using personal identifiable health information for marketing or fundraising purposes without authorization. And there are a whole new set of penalty tiers for violations of this rule. The fact that it is an omnibus rule should give you a clue that you really need to have good legal advice, because there could be anything in this rule that could trip you up if you're not aware. Then we finally have the enforcement rule. This rule lays out how any resulting investigations are carried out and what the fines would be. So for example, if you were not in compliance with any one of the things we've just talked about, and you did it out of ignorance, you could be fined up to $50,000 per violation, all right? And if it was done because of willful neglect, yeah, I went to Gina's and Andy's seminar, I knew everything, but you know what? I'm a small practice, no one's ever gonna follow me. Why should I waste the money on becoming HIPAA compliant? Well, that's willful neglect. And you can be fined up to $1.5 million for that. So if your practice can set aside, a couple $1 million plus any other funds that it would take if you were hacked and you had to cover personal liability for all your patients' information, et cetera. If you could put that money aside and you're willing to pay the fines and everything else, then that's fine. Or you can talk to us about becoming fully compliant and sleep better at night. There's other provisions in the Act. I know we're running short on time. I'm not going to talk too much about them. But remember that you need to appoint a security officer and a privacy officer. You must train all of your employees annually in HIPAA. There's a whole HIPAA curriculum that all of your employees must take every year. And you must have written policies, procedures, and other documents in place to prove that you do have a good HIPAA background. Now, what kind of failures come up in the audits? So one of the most common failures discovered by the Office of Civil Rights is the failure to perform a comprehensive organization-wide risk analysis. That is an analysis of your physical controls. It's an analysis of your office layout. It's an analysis of your computers. It's analysis of the networks. It's analysis of your passwords. It's analysis of your encryption. And anything that would show a vulnerability needs to be audited and documented every year. That's a complete risk analysis. That's the biggest failure that the auditors find, that practices have not undertaken an annual risk analysis. The second major thing they find is risk management failures. The audits usually produce a list of issues, and you must take these issues and put programs in place to resolve the issues or to protect the issues up to a reasonable level. Now, obviously, nobody can be Fort Knox, but there are standard things that if you don't put them in place, the government decides is a failure under HIPAA. Not encrypting your data on your hard drives and when transmitted from one point to another. Encryption is very, very high on the HIPAA list. And not training your employees. If you cannot demonstrate that you've annually trained every employee on everything they need to know about HIPAA, that's another fine. Improper disposal of this personal information. Do you keep your file cabinets locked when they're not in use? Do you have a rule that says that not very many pieces of paper can be lying about at any given time? When someone's done with a document, do you shred it? Do you have a shredding service? Do you have a protection for storing those documents until they're shredded? When they're deleted from a computer, do you have software in place to show that those records were bleached? When you delete something from a computer, it doesn't delete it. All it does is delete the index that points to that data. That data stays there until it's eventually overwritten by other data, which means that if I got access to your hard drive, I could probably reconstruct everything that you deleted for at least the last 90 days, unless you bleached them. So encryption and bleaching becomes an important part of proper disposal. Another thing is when you upgrade your equipment, do you destroy the hard drives? One of the big problems I constantly run into is copy machines. Most small businesses lease a copy machine, and it's really not theirs. They're just leasing it, and every 3 years, the lessor comes in and says, we're upgrading you. They take out the old machine, give you a new machine. Your rate goes up 20 bucks a month, and you're happy because it's a better copier. Copy machines have hard drives. Every single thing that you have ever copied on your copy machine is stored on the copy machine's hard drive. And if you do not bleach or destroy that hard drive, when that machine is taken out of your office, you have just let go all of the information you've copied for the last 3 years. And bad actors can get a hold of that hard drive and have access to everything that they've seen. The final thing is an impermissible disclosure I talked about before. You can't share personal information without proactive permission from the patient. And as I said, to get it right, you really need an attorney to look at those forms. Not adhering to the minimum necessary standard and in a failure to provide patients with their information on request. Those are also big problems. Failure to have a business relationship with a business associate, an agreement in place that says these are the rules that you're going to follow in my office, and this is what you're going to do to protect information if you have it. And if you are breached, a failure to meet those 30 and 60-day limits, huge fines. Now, you also need to explain all of this to your patients. And you have to give your patients a notice of your privacy practices and have them sign that they've received this information. And you must explain to the patient how they can request their information, how they can request that their information be deleted. These are all very technical legal things that you really need an attorney to help you with in drafting and then making sure that you have done everything correct. All it takes is one complaint and you are out of business. Now, we've talked about the fines and penalties. Let's just keep some things in mind. Keep $25,000 per incident, keep $50,000 per incident, and keep $1.5 million in fines in mind. And it really depends on the severity and what happened, but can you afford several $25,000 fines? If you can't, make sure that you are HIPAA compliant. Now, how can we help you? The Campanella Law Offices, contact Gina. They can provide you with comprehensive regulatory compliance, all the documents you need, the policies you need, the patient information that you need, the processes to get their signature, everything. It's a complete package, and Gina has, in her office, has a good amount of experience in all of this. What I can do is the whole technical piece. I specialize in cybersecurity for small businesses. We do a complete risk assessment that includes a physical assessment We search the dark web for anywhere that your practice has been exposed and data is for sale. We do a complete audit of your network. We look at nodes that are exposed. We look at open ports. We look at firewalls, or even if you have a firewall. And from that, we do a complete risk evaluation and recommendation. We can also help you come into compliance, fix all of the problems that we find. The other thing that we do, well, Gina provides you with a complete policy document that covers the legal aspects. The Garlick Group can provide you with a complete policy document that covers all of the elements in password protection, in dealing with third parties, in all the various policies required for cybersecurity, as well as documents that give you a plan for incident response. And if you are interested, we can provide a complete disaster recovery plan. What happens if your whole practice goes up in flames? Are you ready to deal with that? Contact everybody you need to contact, recover all of your data, etc. So the Garlick Group handles all of the technological piece, and Campanella handles all of the legal piece. And together, you can, with us, you can sleep better at night. So why hire us? Well, we are your HIPAA ghost exorcists. So we will consult with you to identify all of your needs. We give you all the policies and procedures necessary to comply. We do all the training for your employees, and we will do all the security and risks audits of your physical and technological environment and provide you with that critical risk analysis that the auditor is going to want to see. So what are next steps for you? Well, your annual audits and documentation have an annual December 31st deadline. Obviously, it's the 22nd of December, so it may be a little late in meeting the deadline this year, but getting started is your first defense against massive fines. So to get started, reach out to Gina at glcbusinesslaw.com for a complimentary consult. She will put you in touch with me if you want to move forward, and we're prepared to begin the process to secure your practice immediately. So thank you very much for your attention. Gina, are there any questions? If you have any questions.
Yes, Andy, there actually are questions. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. And thank you everybody for your attention. And we do have a couple of very good questions. The first one I have for you here is, are there any concerns about using Dropbox in terms of HIPAA compliance? So what are your thoughts on Dropbox, Andy?
Here's my problem. So Dropbox and Box and Google Drive, they're okay. Here's the problem. They don't, all of the information that you store up in Dropbox is encrypted. So we know that it's encrypted. The problem is that you do not own the encryption key. Dropbox owns the encryption key. So that means if any government entity came in and gave Dropbox a warrant for your information, they could give it to them without you're even knowing about it, because they have the key to unlock the encryption. That's a risk. The second problem with Dropbox is that they really don't offer two-factor authentication. So if I got your password, I could access your Dropbox records. And because the encryption key is up in Dropbox or up in Google, technically I could download the data because I have your password. With two-factor authentication, that means that your phone would get a beep and you would have to enter a code. And obviously, since your phone is getting the beep and not mine, I'll never be able to get in there. There are cloud-based storage systems that provide that you can own the key and not the company. The other risk with Dropbox owning the key is that a rogue employee could steal your information. Now, Dropbox has practices in place to protect against that, but the weakest point in any security system sits between the keyboard and the chair. So it's very possible that even with all the controls, your data could be stolen. So Dropbox is okay, but it is not great. If you're interested in what cloud-based systems are better, you can certainly contact me.
Thank you, Andy. And we have one more question. I've heard as a solo practice that I'm so low on the radar that all of this is really not worth the money, that I'm better off just taking the risk financially. What is the risk really?
All it takes is one patient to file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, even if the complaint is specious. All it takes is one complaint. The auditors show up, and once they're in the door, all bets are off. So what's the risk of a disgruntled patient making a complaint against you? If you have no disgruntled patients, fine. If you think that you're too small, fine. I'm not going to make a business decision for you. I'm going to advise you that to be a good business person, you should follow good business practices in compliance with the law and providing cybersecurity for your patient's data is a good business practice. But as I said, all it takes is one complaint and you would be out of business.
All right, well, thank you so much, Andy. That's all the questions we have for now. If any of you think of any questions after the fact, or if you are watching this recorded on our YouTube channel and you're not live with us today, please feel free to email either me or Andy with any of your questions. We're always happy to answer a question. And thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much, Andy, for the wonderful presentation. And I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon.
Yep. Have a great holiday, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.